Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Michelle Graff, and I'm the editor-in-chief at National Jeweler. I'm pleased to welcome you to the latest episode of My Next Question, National Jeweler's webinar series sponsored by RDI Diamonds. Today's session is hosted by our senior editor, Ashley Davis. Ashley will be interviewing Cindy Krupp, founder and president of Krupp Group, and Jen Lowitz, a founding partner of IHPR, about crafting messages on controversial topics and navigating company communications in times of social crisis. Before I turn it over to Ashley to get the webinar started, I want to let our attendees know that if they have a question, they can type it into the Zoom Q&A box. I'll be back on at the end of the discussion to share all your questions. Also, today's session is being recorded and will be available on the National Jeweler website this coming Friday. Thank you, and now I'll turn it over to Ashley to get our discussion started.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I'm so excited to have Cindy Krupp and Jen Lowitz here today, two PR experts who are going to enlighten us with some of their insights into this very eventful year. Cindy Krupp has more than 20 years of experience in brand strategy and public relations. Before founding Krupp Group, she rose through the ranks of Barney's New York, ultimately overseeing its PR department. There, Cindy developed her passion for launching high-end designer brands and honed her skill in working with nascent creative talent to conceive ideas that drive deep customer affinity. Jen Lowitz is the co-founder of IHPR, a Los Angeles and New York City public relations-based strategy and communications agency specializing in celebrity placement, influencer experiences, and editorial outreach. Since 2012, she has developed a business that helps clients shape and share their stories through the most effective channels, platforms, media, and audiences. So without further ado, I'll jump right into our questions. The old adage in communications has been for brands to remain neutral and apolitical so as not to alienate any potential or current clients. In 2020, we've seen a really large shift away from this attitude. Going through intense racial discourse about police brutality, a very fraught presidential election, as well as the global pandemic, we've seen PR strategies have to adapt as customers demand that brands take a stand and let them know how they feel about certain issues. So my first question is, when selling fine jewelry, how do companies speak to their consumer in a way that feels appropriate during a health crisis? So we'll focus specifically on the pandemic to start.
Cindy, you take that.
Thanks, Jen. Well, I'll tell you, there was no rule book on how to do PR in a pandemic. And I was at Barney's during the bankruptcy. So I thought I really had a good handle on crisis management. And this really threw us for a big loop. You know, I think in March, we advised our clients, take a pause, listen, engage in the conversation with your clients. People were turning to social in huge quantities, more so than before, because they were really looking to connect. And so it was an incredible time to allow your customer behind the curtain and really have an authentic conversation, which even further builds the client and brand connection. So we said to our clients, like, stop, listen, hear what your customers are saying, be part of the conversation, be vulnerable. We have the privilege of working with a lot of small brands and a lot of founders, and they could express things like, I'm a mom at home trying to continue to design and I have no help. What do you think of what I just put together? Or I'm scared, I own my own business and this is a time of fear for all of us. And I think it really allowed for, again, an authentic and meaningful conversation. So we advise brands, you can't go dark with social, right? Like you can't just stop. So we said, everyone's in the same boat. It's an even playing field. Get in and have that conversation with your clients and then respond to that conversation. And that was really, I think, like the big sort of kickoff of the pandemic and how we were having our brands engage.
I think part of that too, and Cindy, I agree with all of that. But I think for us also, and we have a similar, I think, client roster when it comes to the jewelry brands is, a lot of it felt, I think there was this fear. First of all, just 2020 has just been like, what can we be afraid of next, and like how to deal with this. But I think too, there was this fear of like being really tone deaf because, those first couple of weeks, I mean, we left our office and we're like, we'll see you guys in 2 weeks. And like our chairs were spinning and we just
So
left.
did we.
Yeah. I mean, the first 2 weeks, it was utter chaos. The jewelry clients specifically just really didn't know, like, are they going to be in business tomorrow? What's going to happen? And, I think the fear was being very tone deaf in this time. Like, you have to also consider that jewelry brands and the founders, they're dealing in a luxury item. It's already putting them in a different echelon. And so you are dealing with, a country that is totally gripped by, can I feed my kid? How am I going to go to work? How am I going to do all these things? And here you are selling a $3,000 necklace. So how do you put those two things together and not sound completely tone deaf, but you also have to keep your business open? So I think, to your point, Cindy, it was really difficult to you have to be human. And I think that's one of the first times when people were able to show up as brands, whereas people behind the brands and really express their humanity. And this is the personality behind, these pretty jewels. We also, it reminded, it feels so long ago that right at that time, Danielle Gotti, who's a colleague of ours in the industry, had reached out to us to put together all the jewelers in that linked initiative to help, to get sales that were going to drive and raise money for No Kid Hungry. But what it also did was give the jewelers a platform to be able to continue selling, to have something to say during that time, to keep them going, but also be giving back. So I think that was, without really realizing it at the time, it was a good bridge to get them through that initial thing. And I think there were 120 jewelers that ended up participating. And I think that people were able to get through that initial fear into, let's try to move into some normalcy here.
And do something proactive that felt like you weren't just saying, look at this pretty ring, but you were saying,
exactly.
This is purposeful and this is meaningful and this business can create change, and engaging in that conversation.
That's great. No, I remember Cindy speaking to you at the time, and we actually did an article just when the pandemic had kind of started here in the United States. And I remember you talking about that you can't go dark during this time, which for a lot of people is maybe their first inclination, especially if I'm a brand I run my own social, I have a small team. So I think that's one really important takeaway. And I think that having a charitable bent or initiative is a great way that you can stay at work and keep a conversation going while feeling like you're not ignoring the elephant in the room. To get a little specific, because I love the really specific examples, I think they're very helpful. If I'm a brand right now planning to launch a campaign that's going to showcase my new collection, it's set for next week, but now my state is going to have new restrictions, or maybe it's the highest number of cases we've seen in my state at the same time. How do I adjust my timing? Do I adjust my timing? How do I handle this in real time how do I do it in a way where I'm not making mistakes?
I'll go, because Sydney and I are, who's going to get? We've had multiple clients that had launches planned, and it was, I think the very first thing I would say is read the room and pay attention to what's going on. There's not a single launch that is more important than what is going on right now. Whether it is the pandemic, whether it was the election, social justice movement, any of these things, there is not a piece of jewelry that outweighs those things. And I think if anything this year has taught us is we are people and we have a lot of feelings about these things, and to ignore that and just drill out there, you're also ignoring, how you've got to deal with editors, and you have to understand that these editors have feelings and they're involved in things, and they have, they have bosses who are telling them what they can write and not write. And so to try to ram it down somebody's throat when that is not what people are interested in seeing right now, you're just doing a disservice, to you and to the brand. And I think that's the most important thing is like, pay attention to what's going on and be a counselor to your client and help them move through a timeline. Even if you have to push it off a couple of times, do it at the time that is right for them and, the social climate going on. I think anybody, if anything, we're not just publicists. We're not just going to get you a great placement. Like our job is to be counselors and to help you grow the brand and to be your partners. So I think that is the biggest thing. Come on, Cindy.
Who has a landline anymore? I turned off my cell phone.
I don't even know what that was. But I do think that's the biggest way that we can be of value to our clients is, not just be somebody that sends them a clip, but to really be their partner and to help them work through a timeline that makes sense.
I completely agree. And we were in the same position with needing to push back launches that we were fully prepared to roll out. And, I think if you can pivot, and that was needed. And especially in fine jewelry, it's not like we were a lot of ready-to-wear brands. With ready-to-wear, they're coming out with new collections constantly. With a lot of fine jewelry, this could be their big initiative for the year. And so we can't launch it in a time where people don't want to hear it. People are in their own crisis. There's so much noise. So we did have to push back many launches, and we will continue to do so. And we're literally making plans and then saying, okay, this is the plan. And then we'll reassess at the end of the week to see if this plan still makes sense, which in my career, I've never had to do. And it's interesting because we have been doing a little bit of market appointments we've reached out, we've connected with a lot of editors who are stir crazy. And we said, we have some new collections. We're doing them outside or we're doing them socially distanced. Are you comfortable? And we got a really great response of media wanting to come in the last couple of weeks. We're doing appointments today and tomorrow for one of our brand partners. And so many people have canceled or said to us, I'm quarantining. It is the week before Thanksgiving and I want to go home. Okay, in a million years, I would never have thought that. But as soon as it came up, I was like, this, of course this is. So again, it's the making the plan. And we immediately said to the client, we're going to need to keep the jewels and we're going to have to do this at a later date as well. But you have to be prepared to, pivot and create new opportunities. You can't say you can't have a hard and fast date. It just doesn't work right now.
But I think what's interesting is what you said, like it literally changes day to day, where last week or even yesterday it was okay to have an appointment and tomorrow it is not.
No.
I think the flexibility and the willingness to roll with it is just so important.
Jen, we should have had our brand sponsor COVID tests at home. Like we're going to send the editor a COVID test at home. That would have been, how did we not think of that from a PR standpoint? That would have been slam dunk. I'm such a Monday morning quarterback.
I think that it seems really important that designers or stores, these small companies have people who are going to be really honest with them, not a publicist who just says, you want to do it now, that's great. So I think it's really important for people to have sounding boards who they trust to lead them the right way. Because as someone who's such a huge jewelry lover, I wouldn't really think anything jewelry related could ever offend me. But the week of the election, seeing someone launch a collection, I was surprisingly irked by it. I was just like, how could you even think of putting this? And even though it's their livelihood, it's just a strange time. So I think whether you have a publicist or, the right publicist, it's that kind of honesty is going to
I can't even imagine the team, and I'm hoping to God it wasn't any of our brands that sent you that, but
I'm thinking, was it any of ours? And we were mindful. We were very mindful.
Can you imagine? And like, someone on your team, you giving them the directive, okay, we've got to launch this, and they're sitting there by themselves in their house, not even with their colleagues, not even being able to turn around and say, she's crazy and what are we doing? And like to collaborate with somebody. But to, that sense of isolation, which we already have already, to be sitting there like, I don't know what to do with this right now. I mean, it puts everybody in a bad position. So yeah, it's tough.
So I think a perfect segue from that is, have there been over this year any specific mistakes you've noticed from any kind of company during the pandemic that can kind of serve as cautionary tales for brands? Because we're going to be dealing with this for a lot longer. So of what to avoid in the pandemic.
Are we talking about pandemic specific mistakes?
I mean, I guess not.
Well, I mean, it sort of opens up, the other conversation about everything else going on.
Oh,
here,
no,
but
sure. But please,
no, I just, again, it goes back to being like, it's the humanity and being tone deaf. I'm not sure how many more times I can say, humanity, but like this was just a slap in the face this year of like, wake up and like, get real with who you are, who your company is, like the brands you're working with. And one of the things very early on when frankly the shit was hitting the fan, like, and clients were freaking out and the world was freaking out, and we had to make staff changes and figure, get our stuff together. My partner said to me, she's like, we have to figure out who you want to go to war with. Like, do you have the team you want to go to war with? And that's not just your colleagues and your direct team, but it's also your brands and the people you're surrounding yourself and, your industry counterparts, and like, who are you surrounding yourself with? And so I think that's just been so important, is to like get real with yourselves and the work that you're doing. So when you see somebody that's doing something, whether it's on social, and frankly, that's really been the only window into brands right now. But it's like, you say, have you seen anybody doing something? When do you not see somebody doing something? You're like, are you kidding me? Whether it's just like it being totally, oblivious and ignoring the world around them, or, like my favorite, I think, Ashley, I said this to you, was the Kim Kardashian. This is one of our 14 horses on our ranch. And I was like, don't do that. It's so over the top and unnecessary right now to act like that. So there's a lot out there.
It's amazing because it's common sense. It's not PR. It's not that, we're trained in that. It's just common sense. Don't be tone deaf. Listen to the conversation happening within your own community, but then also in the greater world, and make decisions with that in mind. Business as usual was not okay and was not what people should be doing. They needed to create opportunities to allow in a new dialogue. And I think it was, brands have an amazing platform and a great opportunity to really get important messaging out there. And to Jen's point, No Kid Goes Hungry and designers band together to do this, which is incredible. So you don't want to not use the platform and just, again, say, look at my pretty horses. There's no value in that. So use it to create meaningful change. Don't do it as lip service, because people could smell bullshit even through social. And then the other thing was people staying quiet and, again, pretending like nothing was happening and there was no tornado swirling around us. Was just, you went, oh my God, who's approving this? Like, how did this get out there? How are they not? And I cannot imagine. And again, Jen and our clients are fortunate. They have us, and we're both loud, opinionated women who are not going to sit by while a brand of ours makes these missteps. But it kind of baffles me, any brand that did not have someone in their arsenal, in part of their army, to your point, that was advising them, just not to be clueless.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. So now to kind of branch out a little bit, one arena that has been as important as it has been difficult this year has been social media. Lots of independent fine jewelry brands have had an extremely successful year, due in large part to direct sales from consumers that find them on Instagram. It's also a platform where the most debate erupts. after George Floyd's death in May led to nationwide protests, we saw lots of brands, large and small, get called out if they were silent, as you were mentioning, or even for posting some kind of support that didn't maybe strike certain people as genuine. So if I'm a brand that's only used to sharing my beautiful designs on social media, what do I do? Do I post? Do I not post? Do I go silent for a certain period of time when life is kind of erupting? What are the biggest mistakes that you've seen as it erupts to civil unrest and conversations about race and inequity?
You want me to start with this
It's a
one,
big-
Jen?
it's a
Sure.
big conversation.
You know, to Jen's point, like call in the troops, make sure that you have an arsenal of really great minds surrounding you that you can utilize as you're navigating this, you know, shitstorm, because it's so unprecedented for all of us. So you want to make sure that you have people outside of your bubble, outside of your organization, that can give you a perspective that's going to actually help you guide through this. You know, I think the biggest simple mistakes that I saw were brands coming off as righteous, making statements about what was going on that had zero authority to do that, who clearly had, there was nothing good going on in their social feed, but yet they felt they were going to use this as a soapbox to preach. And it was awful. And they got such backlash, and it was just tone deaf and bad. And then again, silent. If you're silent, you're complacent. And that is, you know, I think from a brand perspective, you're better off saying something, although in this, I can't imagine anything that would offend anyone, but you're better off saying something and engaging in a conversation. If you lose a few clients, you lose a few clients. But if you stay quiet, it completely diminishes the value of the brand.
You know, this is the topic that, like, it just drives me insane so much. You know, it's and I just, you know, we're three white women talking about BLM and talking. So I'm just, you know, from my perspective and from, you know, our perspective, it's like June was this great awakening, right? And frankly, it's like, it's embarrassing. And it's embarrassing that it was like, oh shit, I should have been doing so much more, not just like, you know, status quo and I'm not racist, but like, what can I do to actively improve the lives of, you know, of Black people, of people of color? Like, what do we do? So we had a big internal conversation and wake up moment and acknowledging like, what do we need to do and how do we go forward? We worked really closely with our clients to be part of this. I cannot tell you how crazy it makes me. And just this morning, I was, you know, cruising through some people's Instagrams in the jewelry world. Okay, you put up your black square and you're listening, you're muted. And then, I don't know, every single square since then is a white hand showing off the jewelry and or another white face, because you weren't really listening and you didn't really give a shit. And it's performative. It is so simple to change the narrative and to change, you know, what we're doing. Cindy, I think you guys also worked with Danielle and Chrissy.
I was about to say, we brought in Danielle and
you know, two of our colleagues
Rutherford,
who are editors, and really, like, from a colleague's perspective, but also, you know, from two Black women, to be saying, like, we learned so much about, like, it is, you know, it's our responsibility to share with our brands that they're defining what beauty looks like, what attractiveness is to other people. And so even if, you know, it's a white person who owns the brand and it's typically their hand, or it's typically, you know, like, hire a Black model, like, do something, like, help change this narrative about what this looks like. Don't just go back, like, sales are fine, everybody shut up, like, nobody really gave you too much flack about it. Like actually do something about it. So I think that, you know, as we're now, what, 6 months from, you know, from June, like, how are you going to maintain this as part of what you do and not just, a little lip service to this? So I get absolutely crazy when I see these brands that were just great and they put up their black square and then they walked away from it. I'd rather you say nothing. I'd rather you acknowledge, that you and your clients really don't care, and that's okay. Like those are your customers. But there is a wide world of people out there who care how you feel about these things. And so you may alienate people, but you're also going to attract new customers who are in alignment with you and your values. It just doesn't feel like you have the privilege to be quiet anymore and to not be part of the conversation. So it drives me nuts when it's just a bunch of crap with the black square. It makes me crazy.
And I do think, to your point, I think people are holding brands accountable in a new way, like this reckoning that has been brought upon through this, which obviously was much needed in this industry. People are now checking back in and making sure that that statement that you made, that you're following through with it. And if your feed is still showing no diversity after 2-3 months ago, or however long, because I don't know what month I'm in now or year, but I think people are calling brands out and holding them accountable, which is a good thing, which is a very good thing. Not easy, but a good thing.
But what's interesting to that is, we've been through this so much auditing our brands and auditing other brands. And, we've struggled with like, oh, they're a small brand. Their business has been hit so hard. They don't have the money to shoot. They don't have the money to do these things, to start changing what their public platform looks like. And the conversations that we've had with Danielle and Chrissy and with some other groups there are so many other ways to be doing this. Like, use your Instagram as your inspiration board and don't just, co-opt somebody else's work. Like, that's great. They shot an editorial with a black model, posting that. Don't do that. That's somebody else's work. Find a way to use that as your inspiration board. Show us how other, ethnicities and the full range inspires you as a designer, and start showing your customers that is equally attractive. And that is also an expanded definition of beauty. So that really resonated with us, as well as, finding not just the black model, but everybody behind the scenes, from the designer to the people you're sending the gifts out to the photographer, the makeup artist. Like, all of these things help people with a paycheck. And also on our end, we have to be willing to walk away from a paycheck. That if someone doesn't align with us and how we want to move forward as a business, then, that's not somebody we work with. Which is not super fun to turn down money right now in this climate, but,
when your soul is still intact, it's a good thing.
Exactly.
So I have a bad habit of always wanting to play devil's advocate, which makes flowing through the world not always the easiest. But when there's so much inequality in this world right now, we're having a moment where we're talking about Black Americans, long overdue, and something that's just kind of like simmered underneath the surface of general culture, wanting to acknowledge it. What about the other groups that we're not talking about at this moment? And I think this is where I struggle, because a lot feels performative. It feels like, well, I know that I need to talk right now about Black Americans, which is absolutely true. But at the same time, there's some, I don't know. There's just
I don't know. I hear what you're saying, but from our perspective, it's, it was easy to put a tag on it because of Black Lives Matter, and it was easy to sort of package that with something that people could understand. But I do think, I hope, I think it's a wider swath than just recognizing, Black people. I do think it is more of a look at people of color, like across, all ethnicities, and races. It's really not. I think for us, it's not just, we're only going to focus on Black. It's Asian and Latinx and as much outside of the white spectrum as there is. So I don't know. I think it's just easier because there was a handle to it, frankly, to refer to it, that simply, but I don't think that that's the case personally.
I think, no, I agree. I think it was that sort of like tag that got us all going, but it's creating a ripple effect. And that is very much what's needed into all of these different ethnicities. And I think it is creating diversity at least conversations we're having with our brands. It's diversity as a whole that they're really seeking for or seeking to create. And I could say as an organization at Krupp Group, we've had so many conversations internally with the team because we obviously want to practice what we preach and we want to make sure that everyone's voice is being heard. And something that came from my team was we wanted to use our social platform to share things that were meaningful to us as individuals and as an organization. And that goes from, we just posted something about kids aging out of the foster care program and how supporting this organization transforms their lives and the path of their lives. And yes, there's a lot of diversity in that network. And we put, so it's about, or books that we're reading, like American Dirt, things that are shifting the awareness and the thought process and making people make different decisions. And it's not Black Lives Matter, it's not. That's such an important part of the conversation and it's still there, but it does need, to your point, Ashley and Jen, there's more of a holistic dialogue that I feel however many months later is happening.
So I think the kind of important takeaway there is just that consumers today are so much more value oriented and really like getting to know the brands they're shopping from. So it's more of opening this dialogue into what does your company stand for? And whether that's like continuing to support causes related to Black Lives Matter, police brutality, as well as other causes, but kind of backing it up by showing all the time that this is like part of who you are as a company.
Yeah, I mean, there's accountability, and that's the thing with social. The customer can hold a brand accountable. When was that ever an option prior? And it's going to create change because people are going to be like, I don't share the same values as you as a brand, so I don't want to shop from you. I don't want to be that. And I do think, I also think there's a lot of really good-hearted, well-intentioned brands that didn't feel comfortable using their social to platform their views because they were afraid of alienating a customer base who perhaps didn't align with theirs. And now they don't give a shit and they are using it, which is amazing, which is incredible. And they have lost customers. We've had clients that have absolutely lost customers because of things that they've posted. But they're in a place where they're like, we want to, if it's someone that's going to represent our brand by wearing something that we create, we want them to be someone that shares our values anyway, so they can go shop someone else.
We have a brand that they launched a Kamala Harris pendant, and it was like kind of a discussion ahead of time, like, do we really want to step out and say this is who we're supporting? And they did it. It's one of their best-selling pieces ever. And as recently as yesterday, we had a team call, like, we are getting literal death threats, like people just like saying terrible things to us on our social and sending emails. But I think that, those loonies aside, great, let them have their voice. But I think then the brand can really stand behind who they are and feel passionate about what they're doing and not feeling like they have to tread so carefully to appease all sides just to get that extra sale. Because you think about all the people who will come to you because you represent them now and you see them. So I think it's having that, using your voice as best you can and as actively as you can is just what's really important.
So I think that that also really relates to another question I had for you ladies, which is with kind of this feeling of like opening the floodgates of we want to know from these companies how you feel. We want to know if you care about what's going on right now. Once we came into election time, does that open the door for brands speaking about politics and speaking about who they're voting for? Is it possible for a brand to have supported Black Lives Matters and to have it kind of made their views known? Is it possible for them to just say vote and to not talk about specific candidates? Is this just kind of an era of total transparency? And how would a small company navigate that? I'm curious.
Jen, you okay if I jump in?
Yep.
I mean, 100%. And all goes. You know, we had brands that were involved in I Am a Voter campaign, and they really put it out there like it's voting. We did a campaign with a ready-to-wear brand of ours and Gloria Steinem, and it was about getting voters to the polls, and that was what mattered to the brand. And I think that's totally appropriate. And doesn't matter what side of the line you're on, voting is important, and it's our right in this country. And so a lot of brands did that. And then to your point, with, Madam Vice President, we have a brand who got a piece on her and was thrilled to post it. I think it really depends on the brand. You have to, if it feels important to the brand and the people that work within the organization of the brand, then you put it out there without hesitation, without fear. You put it out there, but you do have to be prepared. To Jen's point, what her client is experiencing, there are going to be haters. There are going to be people that are coming at you and they feel like social is a safe place for them to create empty threats. And, and you have to be prepared for that. But I don't think if it feels important to a brand and it feels authentic, go for it, and just be prepared for, to have that for the backlash and to be comfortable in that conversation.
I think, jewelry in particular, and this might not sit terribly well, but jewelry is, a lot of it is at a luxury price point, and you're going to have people who are voting on both sides there, and as with everything, but I think the bare minimum was to support, voting rights, and to support the idea of being, present and voting. I think, from our point of view, it was like there was so much at stake, just the bare bones. There was so much at stake in this election with, sort of fundamental human rights and women's rights, and there was a lot there. And I think why, for the brands of ours that we work with, and some of the other brands that we see out there, like, why stop now? If this is what's important to you, if you finally feel free enough to really get out there and like talk about it and rip the Band-Aid off, just go for it. Like, it wasn't the time to be shy if you had real feelings about, say, women's reproductive rights, and where that might lie in the election. So all of our brands, I think, got involved in at least saying, go vote, make your voice known. But I think that we were really behind a lot of our brands that wanted to support advocacy on so many levels. So it's just such a wild year. Like, I don't even know how to start with it, but yeah, it was important. And I don't think you can really stay silent, but plenty of people did, and with little effect.
How would a brand handle the pushback that comes with being more open and talking about the things that are important to them? So, and specifically, I want to deal with more like not some crazy person who's sending you vitriolic messages online, but pretend I have a client who's like, I really wish you hadn't started talking about politics. Like, I love you and I love your work, and it's really difficult for me, like, that I have to see politics on your page about jewelry. What is the correct way to handle that?
I don't know if there is a correct way to handle that. I think that, part of that social engagement first you have to decide, are you going to engage, and will you acknowledge when somebody puts that up there? You could have a brand that gets, huge amounts of comments. And so it would be hard to sift through all of that. But I think, from a PR point of view, and a communications point of view, it's important to acknowledge your customer and we hear you, but, we also, just like you have your beliefs, we have ours, and, we hope you'll just enjoy the jewelry. I don't think that you can beg somebody to, to ignore that. But I also don't think, like, if you're going to go out and take that position, like, stand behind it and be proud of it, and be polite to someone that doesn't necessarily agree with you using that platform. But, don't forget that so many of these jewelry lines are based on, they're not giant corporations. These are people, and these are designers behind them with feelings and thoughts about things. So I think it's a risky run, but I say you acknowledge them, you're polite with them, and you hope that they stay if they can bear it. And if they don't, they're going to have to go find it from a very apolitical, generic brand.
Right.
Agreed. I mean, I think Jen and I are both in this right now, advising clients who are facing exactly, Ashley, in this scenario. And our advice is be kind, be respectful. These people are having a conversation with you in your home, because this is the brand social platform. And, it's okay to say things like, we appreciate your perspective, and we value, that you've reached out to us, and how great that we live in a country that we can openly share our different perspectives and our different views in a safe way. And, like, that's it. Kill them with kindness. Don't engage. And you're not going to be able to please everybody. You're just not. And again, as a brand, you have to decide, does this matter enough to me? Does this matter enough to my team that we're willing to face the backlash and possibly lose some clients? And I think for the most part, people are like, yeah, it's okay. It's okay if you don't agree with me. But I never think blocking someone and their comments is the right decision. It's like a taboo no. But I think kill them with kindness. It's not the time to get into a heated debate. But I do think you could say, I appreciate that we live in a country where people have, varying views, and that we can share them in this platform. And
I think it's also okay to then, maybe provide them with an email address. Like, if you want to talk about this further, reach us here. And it gives you an opportunity then to move that conversation online or offline, if they're that interested in having it. And then you don't need to continue that on your social platform, but you're being respectful, you're engaging, and you're giving them an option to continue talking to you if that's of interest. But I think, every time I see a brand doing that, I actually think it's really like, it says, I see you and I'm reading this, but let's talk, and I'm happy to talk about it further, but this is not necessarily the forum for that.
Right. And with people having to act so fast this year, I think especially as protests started in cities all over the country, people felt like they needed to contribute to the conversation. People were taking in a lot of information and wanting to make sure that they were kind of representing themselves the way they wanted to be represented. I think it's also been easy to experience some gaps, maybe because you were moving so quickly that you reposted something that sounded great, and then later maybe some people started DMing you or commenting and calling you out and saying, oh, that's not what that's maybe something different than you thought it was. Or maybe you started talking about Black Lives Matter and people started commenting, why have all the models in your campaign in the last 12 months been white? How do you handle the moment where you have landed yourself in hot water? I love this question.
Good. Thank you. I appreciate that you love this question.
We all love this question. There's two things. And I think, what was I'm forgetting what the hashtag was, but it was when everybody was passing around, like, nominate your women, and
challenge accepted.
Okay. Challenge accepted was really based around like Turkish femicide. And there is this knee-jerk reaction of like, well, shit, if I don't get involved in this, people won't think I'm as cool and popular as everybody else. And like, I'm in your circle and I want to show you I'm in your circle. Why don't you take a second to like actually look at what you're doing? And if you know, I think actually I've written this, like, people were deleting those black and white photos pretty quickly after it came out, you know, what it was. So the intention was really sweet and lovely, like in this time when we're all by ourselves and we support each other, but like, take a second to figure out what you are doing. There is no rush. This is not ending tomorrow. Like, let's take a second here. I think, you know, for the gaffes, that one just really, killed me. But, you know, I remember seeing, and I'm sure you guys saw a bunch of these too, like in June, there were some brands, I mean, just, you've never seen such a white brand ever, and really being taken to task on who are you and what are you doing. And I think that, you know, it was worse that they were deleting the comments and the engagement, so that you're silencing people's voices who, you know, have a history of being silenced and need to be heard. And you should be called, you should be, you know, held accountable for these things. So on one hand, if you've done something wrong, take your licks and own up to it, and you apologize and you figure out how you are actually going to do better, you know, internally and externally. But yeah, I think that it's just pause and take a second before you jump into something is really like the first piece of advice I would give to a client. You know, it's just too immediate.
Yeah, it definitely was a year of people racing. Again, I think people were so outside their comfort zone. It's funny. I have something in my, I'm sharing too much, but it's just the three of us. So it's fine. It's super private, this conversation, but,
Sure.
that I have on my calendar that says pause, don't react. And it's like the first thing I look at in the morning, and it's something I've, you know, had forever. And I do think it was, these mistakes were made when people were moving too quickly. So I definitely agree with Jen, pause. But then if you screw up, own it. The only way out is through it sometimes. And you just kind of have to own it and say, mea culpa, my bad. And then say, we're internally regrouping on this. Like, this is something that if it's something that you can set a plan or a strategy, especially with, you know, Black Lives Matter, with all, you know, all of a sudden you have all of this, your whole feed is white women, but you come out with the black box. Yeah, you're going to get called out pretty hard for that. So your next move needs to be, okay, you posted that. How are you following through with this? What's that going to look like for your company? What's your plan? And share that, and then be prepared to walk the walk and stick to it. But if you make just a huge snafu, own it. Just own it, apologize. And again, it shows you're vulnerable and you're human. And hopefully that will, you know, help you to further build that relationship with your customer.
I mean, it's Brene Brown, the power of vulnerability all over again, like, you know, the guru. So I just, you know, we had a client who had a pretty white feed, really lacked diversity. And, you know, we've had discussions where this designer wanted to start doing some different initiatives and putting forward, and was concerned that the backlash would be there. And like Cindy said, you know, it was like, if somebody says something, it's okay. Like, that's part of the conversation. And it's a conversation, like, you can't move forward until you've had that conversation, until you've dipped into it and sort of like, you know, you felt all the feels, and like, you know what it's like to live in that discomfort for a little bit, and to own up and acknowledge where you've been, and how can you do better? What can you actively do to be more inclusive and representative of everybody? So it's messy. It's certainly messy, and it's hard, and it's full of, you know, scary feelings and nervousness. But I think that you know, this sounds crazy, but like, I'm so proud of the work that seeing, you know, a lot of brands coming through with. I'm proud of my team, and seeing what, you know, I mean, we have conversations where we've got, you know, all team members and everybody's on, and people are getting super emotional and opening up about feelings that they just never thought that they could bring to work, and to share things that maybe before it wasn't appropriate. So I think that, you know, really dipping into where it's uncomfortable is a place you have to get to first. So, there's so much to be done. There's so much to be done always, but I have real moments of pride of seeing some real greatness come out of it.
It definitely feels like a new era, which is why it's so fantastic to get insights from you ladies as we're all navigating this kind of new way of being. So I imagine that we need to open it up for questions now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Ashley, Cindy, and Jen. That was a really great discussion, and we have some great questions here. And thanks again to our sponsor, RDI Diamonds. As a reminder, you can still type questions in the Zoom Q&A box at the bottom of the panel there, and I'll try to get to as many as possible. I'm going to give people a couple minutes to enter some more questions, and then I'm just going to say first a quick word about RDI Diamonds. RDI Diamonds, the selection you want, the quality you need. Thousands of diamonds, that's just the beginning. RDI offers a wide range of services and support to help you succeed. From flexible memo options, a partnership with De Beers Group Industry Services, to generous stock options and cost-efficient shipping. RDI's goal is to provide the highest quality of both care and diamonds to your store. Visit rdidiamonds.com today to learn more. That is rdidiamonds.com. Now I want to get started with our listener questions. One of the first ones we have is one listener wants you to both talk a little bit more about the specific changes you made at your companies as they pertain to diversity. And Cindy, I'm going to throw this one to you first. I know you mentioned having Danielle Prescott and Chrissy Rutherford come and talk to your staff. And for people who don't know, Danielle and Chrissy are two former fashion editors, I believe, who launched a consulting company called 2BG, Two Black Girls, and they do diversity consulting. I'm going to go ahead and drop a link into the chat of their Instagram. So if anybody wants to hire them, they can do that. But Cindy, do you want to talk a little bit about what you learned from Danielle and Chrissy?
Sure. So we brought Danielle and Chrissy in to talk to the Krupp team, and then also we offered it to all of our clients, whoever was able to participate. And they were great in, they had, to what Jen mentioned earlier, they were great in giving guidance of the types of conversations that brands should be having around this, how to address when you do have, an all white feed and you start to diversify and you're getting a bit of backlash from customers. How do you continue that conversation? Things to say, things absolutely not to say. They were really great with that. And then also the importance, I think we were all so focused on the optics and making sure that there was diversity in the feed, but something that and I'm embarrassed to say this, that they reminded us of the importance of creating a network of diversity. And so even if it's not what you're seeing on the screen, it's the talent behind it, the stylists, the photographers, the graphic designers, and making sure that the network of resources that you are working with as a brand is supporting this community. And I think that was like, that for us was just and we have a very diverse team here at Krupp Group. It's just something that we've, always had. And so it was something that I haven't had to tackle in the way that a lot of brands have had to, but it definitely, it made me look at our vendor resources list and say, we do not have enough diversity in this list, and really go after seeking that talent. And there's so much talent out there. It's not like finding a needle in a haystack. It's really easy to find. So that was an amazing piece of advice that they gave us at Krupp Group and our clients.
So for us, and similarly, those are the things that, we're looking at too. And after that conversation with Chrissy and Danielle especially, but so some of the things that we've done from the get-go, and it's like super basic, but it really changes stuff considerably. So we re-edited our social feed of who we were following so that it was, the split, previously it had been predominantly, it's like, fashion brands and stylists and editors and all this, but, really white people. And so we changed up a lot of the information that was flowing in to be much, much more diverse. because it changes then what we're able to learn about and see and hear, which is super important. We also worked with our teams so that our lists of people that we work with, and conduct outreach with, whether it's editors, influencers, celebrities, that we were reaching a certain percentage threshold of how those lists were split. And then one of the things that we're doing for next year is, we have sort of a letter and mission prepared for all of our clients so that they understand that here's where we are. This is what the year has looked like. And going forward, this is how we're going to conduct your business. And it's going to be X percentage of all of these lists are going to look like this. These are the vendors, this is the split of vendors we're going to recommend you use. And basically let them know who we are. And then they can choose, is that how they want to work? Are they happy, working with a partner like that? And if not, okay, like we understand, but then we're not the right fit. So it's really something we want to stand behind and make sure that we are holding each other accountable to and moving forward like that.
And Jen, that's really interesting. You mentioned that letter. Is this something you said you're going to present your clients with, or you have already?
We send a year-end, holiday card and everything, but this year instead we'll be sending this note out to the clients because I think it's really important for us, like I said, for accountability, and also to make sure that we are partnering with people whose values, they don't have to be this, nobody has to believe the same as us, but I think our fundamental values have to be aligned, and that, going forward, then we can be really good counselors to them because we know that they have the same goals at heart. So yeah, that's our end of year letter for them.
That's really cool. I'll be curious to see how your clients react. Like if anybody kind of does say like, I don't want to do it this way. Sorry, bye.
I'll be shocked, honestly, if anybody, says so, but I guess good for them if they do. But it's just like, how can you not be transparent right now? And how can you not ask, your clients to be equally on board with you? How we can't get the work done otherwise, because you can't sit there saying to somebody like, hey, this is, I'd really love to dress this celebrity. I'd really love to work with this influencer and, get a real cagey answer about why they don't want to. Like, let's get on the same page. Let's do this right.
I'm sorry, Cindy, I was interrupting. Is there something you wanted to add?
No. I'm thinking the days are like, we're in Groundhog's Day, but something else that, Jen mentioned that Danielle and Chrissy shared with us, that first of all, there was a lot of low hanging fruit. Like this was not, if a brand feels overwhelmed by this shift, it's a very easy sort of shift. This should not be so cumbersome that you're crippled by it. It definitely is just a bit of an awareness and an ease of that. But we immediately started to make sure that when we put forth a VIP list or a digital influencer list, that it was a diverse list. We set percentages and we made sure not one client pushed back. Every client was thankful that we were being thoughtful and helping to guide their brand in the right direction. And to Jen's point, anyone that pushed back probably is not someone that we want to work with.
No, that makes sense. So, Jen, this is kind of a little bit of a crazy question, but you mentioned that one of your clients created the Kamala pendant, which I saw. It's beautiful. And you mentioned that you were getting death threats. Is there ever a time when you start to take that kind of thing seriously enough to take it to the authorities or say something? Or do you just look at those things and just...
No. And first of all, this is all like so new for, people to be like, we are living in an era, there is so much hate going on. There is so much hate all the time with people feeling real comfortable, getting as nasty as possible. You have to kind of tune some of it out. And I think if somebody thought it was really credible, of course they would do something, but this is just people being, just feeling real proud to be hateful and to feel like they've got that freedom to do that, which I suppose, like, isn't that the blessing of this country, is you've got that option. But no, I don't think anybody has taken that seriously at this point.
Okay. And we have a listener who wants to know, our jewelry business donates 10% of every purchase towards relief in Africa for orphans. How do we talk about this and jewelry? How do we kind of tie it into the jewelry we're selling?
I mean, the beauty of you have social media today, that's an easy one. You don't have to worry about having a budget to take out a print ad and, you know, a magazine. You can put that, and so many brands today are doing that. We're working with brands that were doing it prior to the pandemic and Black Lives Matter, and we're promoting it on their social and sharing the piece and saying we're proud that we've partnered with, and a portion of proceeds. It's pretty easy to get it out there. And obviously, if you have a PR team, our job is to make sure that it jumps off of social and lives in some sort of editorial component as well.
Cindy, how do you feel about 10%?
It feels really low to me. I think that that's not something that, you can certainly put it out there. I don't know how much it's going to motivate the customer. We're seeing, I mean, we're working with a brand that's, you know, 100% of proceeds are going to. I think that it's, you know, the numbers are normally a lot higher. 10% feels really low.
And I agree with that. I think that it's awesome to get into, you know, to want, like, to make a founding philosophy of your company that you're going to give back is awesome. And I think really where people need to be. I think what, you know, knowing jewelry margins and knowing how much wiggle room there is in between retail and what it costs to make, I think it doesn't feel substantial enough. It doesn't feel like it's meaningful enough. It feels like you're trying to get into the story. And I don't think editors are necessarily excited to run anything at 10%. Ashley, I mean, you'd know, like, I just, if you can do more, I would do more.
I do think this might be 10% of every sale of jewelry.
Yeah, it's 10% of every purchase.
I still think if you can do more, and certainly not every company can do 100%. I mean, that's bonkers. You have to really be able to, like, get behind it in a very meaningful way. That's really substantial, obviously. But I think if there is some room, it feels a little bit more legitimate and meaningful to be able to do more than 10%. And I mean, that's just advice that we would give any of our clients who came to us. And I'm sure we've given it many times this year when they said, we're going to do 10%. We're like, no, because you just want to, like, from a practical standpoint, you just want to be in the game. Like if you want to be considered among 10 other brands that are all giving 20% or higher, you sort of stand out now as the outlier, but it also just doesn't have the same, I think, meaningful push behind it. But, you know, every brand has to do, for any brand to do something is great. Every brand should do what they can. If you can, do more.
It is interesting how many brands will pitch you, we're donating a portion of proceeds. When you ask what the portion is, which I think more and more people will be doing, they're not very forthcoming with it. And so I think it's important that full transparency at this point.
We just have one last question. It's kind of along those same lines. Going forward, do you think collections, specifically jewelry collections, having some kind of charitable aspect is going to become more commonplace and is going to become almost the norm? Like, people want to know, oh, this new collection, like, where is this money going? What's the kind of charitable contribution behind this?
I think non-jewelry specific. I think that that's something that's going to, and I hope it's something that becomes the norm for brands across the board. Again, I think that it's what the consumer wants. And I think that if a brand is listening, they'll create an arm, whether it's a charity component or a foundation within the brand that's doing the work. But I do think there's a lot of brands out there and customers have a lot of choice now. And I do think they want to feel that the brands that they're giving their hard-earned money to are helping to create meaningful change. And so I think that's going to be a movement across brands in every category.
And I mean, I think that also could include messaging around, you know, I'm making all of my sweatpants now from recycled plastic bottles, or, you know, I've joined this organization and I'm used only Fair Mind Gold now. It doesn't necessarily have to be charitable, but it has to be showing where you stand on social issues.
What are the brand ethos and values? And you know, from, like you said, you know, where are you getting your materials and how are you sourcing and manufacturing, all the way to a charitable component or a foundation, but like it's the ethos.
Cindy, Jen, thank you so much. Such a great discussion. We really appreciate it. And Ashley, thank you so much for hosting. We'll be back with another episode of My Next Question next Tuesday, November 23rd. Going to sneak in a little pre-Turkey Day episode, and that'll be at 2 p.m. Eastern, and that is titled Unwrapping the Holiday Season. Associate Editor Lenore Fideau is going to be hosting that. I'm sorry, I just misspoke. That's the 24th. Associate Editor Lenore Fideau is going to be hosting that episode, and she's going to be interviewing retail-minded founder Nicole Leinbach-Ryla about her predictions for the holiday season. You can read more about it and register at nationaljeweler.com/webinars. I dropped that link into the chat as well. Thanks again for joining us, everyone, today, and please take care.